Welcome back to Cablevision's Meet the Leaders. Our guest now is New York Congressman Bishop. Congressman Bishop, thanks for being here. We're here in the Capitol, and a lot of people back home in your district, the 1st Congressional District, I'm sure are asking you, Congressman, do you think the economy is turning around? Are we going to see the kind of job growth that we need to make up for the tens of thousands that were lost over the last 2.5, 3 years?
Well, I think certainly all of the measures are favorable right now. We have a long way to go and a very, very deep hole to dig out of. But all of the measures, whether it be the stock market or retail sales or manufacturing or for the first time in 13 months or 18 months, an increase in the number of jobs. So I think all of those measures are very positive, but as I say, we have a long, long way to go, and the most important measure is going to be the number of new jobs.
Now, my sister's in the real estate business. She works out of the Smithtown, St. James area in the western part of your congressional district, and she says, the real estate economy is robust. There's a lot of activity. A year and a half ago, that wasn't the case.
Right, and I'm hearing the same thing all over my district, and that again is an encouraging sign. New home starts are up, retail sales are up. So at any rate, I think we have turned the corner, but I think it's premature for any of us to declare victory, and we really can't, in fairness, declare victory until we've got America back to work. And we made, as I say, to increase 160,000 jobs in the last month, that was great, but we need to put several months back to back with much higher job growth numbers than that.
Well, let's talk about some of the strategic investments that the government made to prevent more layoffs. One area was in the area of infrastructure and energy conservation. How are those dollars being invested in your congressional district?
Well, we biggest project in our district right now in terms of infrastructure is a major project, long overdue, on Route 112 north of Route 25, and that's well on its way, and a lot of people working on it, and once it's done will be a big improvement. Suffolk County has received more stimulus funding than any other county in the state of New York outside of the 5 boroughs. A lot of that has to do with Brookhaven Lab. There's a huge project going on at Brookhaven Lab right now, National Synchrotron Light Source 2, which is putting to work about 1,000 people who would otherwise not be working.
What kinds of jobs are those?
We're talking about plumbers, electricians, carpenters, sheetrockers, pipe fitters. I mean, we're talking about the whole spectrum of Long Island labor.
And when that project is built and operational, what will it mean in terms of the work at Brookhaven?
Well, it'll mean the work at Brookhaven is maintaining its cutting-edge appeal, and it will mean that we will be bringing scientists to Brookhaven from all over the country and, frankly, all over the world to conduct their work at this new facility. So it will bring lots of high-paying jobs, which will spawn other industries around the lab, much like what has happened around Stony Brook University. So it's a very, very good thing, both in terms of the short term, putting people to work, and then the long term in terms of stabilizing the economy of that part of Suffolk County.
And what about energy conservation? I know that part of the stimulus money was being made available for people to get tax breaks, so that they can install solar panels and do other things to conserve energy, make their homes more energy efficient.
Yeah, frankly, it's a wonderful idea. The money has been slow coming out the door, and that's a problem that needs to get fixed, and in fact is being fixed. But once we get that going, again, everybody wins. You've got homeowners who are going to be saving money. You have builders who will be doing the retrofitting of the home so that they'll be putting people to work, and we'll be reducing the carbon footprint of our home. So everybody wins, as I say. It's just getting the money out the door and getting it into the hands of the homeowners and the contractors so they can do the work.
2 years ago, a year and a half ago, when the stimulus bill was passed, there was a lot of money that went out the door very quickly to make sure that we wouldn't have tens of thousands of layoffs in education.
Well, that's actually a part of the stimulus bill that I'm the most proud of.
You serve on the education
I serve on the
committee.
Education Committee, and I wrote the language in the stimulus bill that basically required the states to backfill on a dollar-for-dollar basis the cuts that were going to come down to local school districts because of the difficulties in the state. On Long Island, $157 million of federal money came to replace what wasn't going to come from the state. And Tom DiNapoli did a study, found that if we had not provided that funding—
That's the state controller,
the state
Tom DiNapoli.
controller, one of two things would have happened. either school real property tax rates would have gone up by three times what they did go up, or about 3.5% of the workforce would have been laid off. Now, either outcome would have been unacceptable for Long Island. So we kept people working, and we kept the real property tax rates down as low as they could have been, and we maintained the quality of education in our classroom. So again, from every vantage point, that was a wise thing to do, and I'm proud of the role that I played.
Now, that's a 2-year program, so the second part of that money will be flowing to the states. People are concerned that what happens in year 3 and year 4, given the fact that states like New York and many others are suffering from serious deficits.
New York is facing a very, very serious deficit, and I mean, you know, New York's budget situation is both a short-term crisis and a long-term crisis, and schools are a big piece of that. Now, there is a bill in Congress that will address the school piece of it, so as, again, that we would keep schools whole without providing massive property tax increases to the people of Long Island and frankly all over the state. I'm hopeful that we can get that through. I think we can get it through the House. Whether we can get it through the Senate or not, I don't know.
Let's talk about higher education, which is an area that you have focused on. One of the most impressive pieces of legislation was work that you've really championed, which was to reorganize and restructure the student loan program and get more money where it's supposed to be, which is to provide low-cost student loans to families who are trying to send their kids to college.
Yeah, what we did is we simply eliminated a very inefficient and very expensive loan program and replaced it in its entirety with an existing federal loan program that operates much more efficiently and much less expensively. The net effect is that we were able to take approximately $70 billion, money that would ordinarily, under this other loan program, flow to banks and other loan providers, take it from the banks and put it in the hands of needy students in the form of increased grant aid. So significant increase in student financial assistance, non-repayable, without one new dime of taxpayer expenditure, and frankly, we were able to return money to the Treasury to reduce the deficit. So this was a very good thing for us to do, and it puts federal resources where they belong, which is helping people in need as opposed to augmenting the bottom lines of banks and other lenders.
How difficult was that to get through? If people are watching this and say, well, that makes perfect sense. Cut out the middleman. After all, it is federal money. They already have a structure in place to facilitate and administer the program, so why not just use that for this purpose? You would think that that was a win-win-win and it'd be a no-brainer.
Well, it seemed to me that it was a no-brainer, but there was a lot of resistance based on two things. One, there was a concern on the part of some members, and understandable, that they had large student loan providers in their districts, and those student loan providers were going to lay off people. Now, the student loan program that the federal government is maintaining is an enormous program. We're going to contract with student loan providers to do the servicing. So we're going to be able to protect a great many of the jobs that people fear are going to be lost. But the second piece was it was viewed within the context of the Troubled Asset Relief Program, within the context of the stimulus. So it was viewed as one more effort on the part of government to take over anything that it could.
But this was really a government-sponsored program to begin with.
It's a government-sponsored program to begin with, and if the government weren't providing the capital to the private loan program, and right now the private loan program still exists, we're providing 60% of the capital. The private loan program wouldn't exist without government providing the capital. So
how many more students do you think will get loans, and how much did you increase the typical loan?
What we increased what we increased was the grant assistance.
Right, that's what I mean.
The loan assistance will remain the same but less expensive to go after. The grant assistance, we've increased the maximum Pell Grant by, I believe it's $500.
Which is significant.
Which is significant, and we've tied the Pell Grant maximum to the CPI. So as the consumer price index goes up, so also will the Pell Grant maximum, so that the Pell Grant will maintain its buying power. Very important to students.
Well, and you once ran the Long Island University campus at Southampton, and every day you must have been dealing with students and their families who just needed a little extra $500 in a grant, a lower interest rate, and that would be the difference between being able to attend the school, university, or not.
That's exactly right, and that was part of what informed my passion as we went through this, because I spent 29 years working with students, mostly needy students, who were not for the help of outside sources, wouldn't have been able to, get their slice of the American dream. And so this, to me, struck me as a very reasonable way of helping those students. Again, no new taxpayer expenditure, saving money for the federal government, and streamlining the process by which students go after the money.
Let's talk about Wall Street regulatory reform. The Securities and Exchange Commission brought an action against Goldman Sachs that said that they gamed the system. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, first off, I'm glad to see the Securities and Exchange Commission institute an enforcement action.
A lot of people said that prior to the collapse of Wall Street and the financial industry, if the Securities Exchange Commission had been doing its job, had it been the watchdog it's supposed to be, perhaps it wouldn't have been as deep, as severe. We certainly wouldn't have had the Bernie Madoffs of the world with these Ponzi schemes.
No question about it. And one of the stories of the financial collapse of the summer and fall of '08 is not just deregulation, it's anti-regulation, the total absence of regulation. If you look at AIG, if you look at the credit default swaps, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, basically of insurance sold to financial institutions and investors without a single dime to cover in the event that they ever had to make good on the insurance. And one of the things that's revealing about AIG, it's mostly an insurance business. The insurance part of AIG, heavily regulated, doing just fine. The unregulated part of AIG is what basically tipped the economy into free fall. So, there's this notion that government should get out of the way. When government gets out of the way, at least as it relates to the financial regulatory system, bad things happen. So I think what this financial regulatory bill that's currently being debated in the Senate is about, it's about fixing the sort of the preconditions of financial activity that led us to the collapse that we had in the summer and fall of '08. All of those conditions remain in effect. We have to fix those if we want to avoid yet another collapse.
Now, Goldman Sachs is considered the gold standard as far as investment houses. And some of the evidence that has come out, emails and others that Senator Levin and the SEC investigators, as part of their complaint, showed that they were actually betting against their own position.
Yep.
Or at least part of it was, and they weren't disclosing that to the investors who were buying the securities from them.
Yeah, indeed. And it certainly shakes the confidence that investors should reasonably have in the institutions with which they're dealing. And it certainly calls into question the motives of the people who are packaging these products and then selling them to their investors while at the same time betting against the products that they've put together and that they're selling. So there's no question. I believe that the SEC action is going to ultimately help us push financial regulatory reform in the same way that that Advent Blue Cross Blue Shield,
well, they had the huge increasing
their rates by
California.
39%, was a catalyst for healthcare reform.
So, as a New Yorker, and there are a lot of people in your congressional district who work on Wall Street, who do very well. They have second and third and fourth homes in some cases, or it's a primary residence out there. As you see regulation, some people have argued that it will hurt New York. Others have said the right kind of regulation can actually create the rules that will enable the financial services industry in New York to prosper again.
I think that's absolutely the case. If you look at the history of financial regulation, we had a whole series of financial regulations put in place after the Great Depression in the mid and late 1930s. We really didn't have any severe or serious banking crisis until deregulation began in the 80s, and then we had the collapse of the savings and loan institutions. We now have yet another era where deregulation and anti-regulation was the norm, and we had yet another collapse. Sound, well thought out regulation, pardon me, is helpful to the financial
industry. Now, your constituents, I know you held public hearings on a whole range of issues, and you meet with them regularly. Are they telling you, we have to make sure that this doesn't happen again? We need to reform Wall Street?
In the main, yes, indeed they are. And what we hear more than anything else from is no more taxpayer-funded bailouts, and that's precisely what this regulation would see to it is the case. Okay. No more taxpayer-funded bailouts.
Congressman Tim Bishop, thanks for coming and joining us here in this special edition of Cablevision.
Happy to be here, Patrick. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. We'll have more from Washington, so stay with us.